I want to win. I want to win. I'm very clear. And I want to win like I want my two daughters to have a democracy to live in and a planet to live on. And so I am just, there's no time to be polite. There's no time to not say the thing that needs to be said. Like we need to say it because we are in the fight of our lives, and we need to make movements healthy and functional in order to meet this moment for the most vulnerable communities.
Speaking of winning, because you're clearly a winner, right? And you have created a playbook for how to win in the art of putting a book out. In a moment, I do want to dive into what you've learned, how you've won in this particular chapter of your life, which is putting the book out. But even before putting the book out, getting really strategic about how am I going to get this book in the hands that deserve to have it in their hands. You're listening to Madam Speaker Says, your no fluff cheat code to becoming the voice everyone listens to. I'm your host, Makhokhodi. If you've been waiting for a permission slip to straighten your crown and take up space like you invented the blueprint, Madam Speaker Says got you covered. No whispers, no apologies, just you, me, and some bold ass moves. Let's get into it. Welcome, everybody. You are listening to Madam Speaker Says. I am your host. I am Makhokhodi. And this particular podcast does exactly the thing that Madam Speaker is about, this particular episode. We're going to take you behind the scenes of storytelling with a badass, like all the capital, all the deep bass badass woman leader, right? This is a phenomenal woman who spent decades in the movement, in the fight for all of the right things, for social justice, for things that we really believe in. And she's here to spill the tea on what thought leadership could be, right? What we are disrupting from the fuddy-duddies, as well as the playbook that she's just used fresh off the press, like literally fresh off the press, launching her book, which is a level of brilliance. I was just gushing to you. Welcome, first of all, Vanessa.
Thank you. It's such an honor and a joy to be here with you.
It is so beautiful to be here with you. And I want to let the people know, like, listen, okay, Vanessa has receipts that are so deep and so legitimate. We're talking to somebody who has over 30 years of experience as an organizer and working in the movement. In South Africa, we would call it the struggle. In other circles, it might be called social justice movement, right? And you are someone who has spent so much work from the ground level up, building philanthropy and reimagining, quite frankly, some of the things that you did with over 100 grantees completely changed the game, completely brought in a lens of thinking about how money moves that didn't exist before in philanthropy, right? And at the same time, you're also somebody who came under fire, like so many of our brilliant leaders have, particularly Black and brown women. And I mean, the thing that you did with it through this book, Unrig the Game. Can you please hold up a copy? Because people need to know on a level, like, you need to get this not just for yourself, you need to get this for everybody. And look at how gorgeous, first of all, okay? This is the level of beauty that, like, the cover is gorgeous, but the contents are fierce and they're fire. And we're going to get into so much of that during our conversation today. But Vanessa, the very first thing that I want to ask you, and it's of course related to the book, is why does this kind of thought leadership matter? Why does it matter for Black, brown women to be authors, to write a book that's as disruptive and as forward-looking, right? And as deeply researched as Unrig the Game?
Well, first of all, thank you. What a warm and kind introduction. I appreciate it so much. I'm really excited for this talk. Well, I mean, I think that women of color, and this is part of the thesis of the book, is that because of what we've had to navigate in our lived experience in this country of navigating the intersectional forces of patriarchy, of white supremacy, of, colonialism, of classism simultaneously, that there is a wisdom there. Because we cannot get free ourselves or free our children or our families without dealing with those things simultaneously, there is a wisdom about how to kind of unshackle society from these things that are hurting all of us. So I think there's just an orientation that when we're bringing our voices, whether it's to op-eds, whether it's to books, whether it's to podcasts, there's an orientation that's actually liberatory for the widest cross section of people. And there's something there for people to take in terms of strategy, in terms of approach and paradigm and praxis. So I really do believe that. And I've gotten nourished by so much of that from writers that I've read over the years. And, there's also this piece around silence, which, this book was scary to write. It felt I had a lot of fear come up as I contemplated it. There were several times that I thought about killing the project because fear came up around it. And the fear is that these are things that women of color leaders talk about with each other all the time, but we talk about them sometimes in hushed voices over kitchen tables. We talk about them in the hallway after a meeting. They are not things that have been discussed in the public square. And yet, my observation from watching how systemic all of these dynamics were that were impacting leaders was that it's not only hurting these leaders, it's hurting our movements and their ability to win. And so it was so important to me to break silence. I saw a lot of parallels being a survivor myself between the silence of the battering that many women of color leaders take to the silence of rape culture. Huge parallels because you don't want to speak on it because you're afraid it's going to blow back on you and you're going to be blamed for your own pain. And the only way through that is to break it and is to break it collectively, which is why I interviewed over 45 leaders for this book. But this idea and some of the words of other women, feminists who got me through the process of breaking the silence was thinking about the words of Adrienne Rich, who said when a woman tells the truth, she creates the possibility for more truth around her. Remembering the words of Zora Neale Hurston when she said, if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Remembering even like the Gen Z activists and who are part of the people power movement in Kenya, that when you lose your fear, they lose their power. So like just calling on those reminders and, stepping into and through the fear in a way that I know that the people whose words have liberated me off of the page and from their voices have had to step through fear in order to put things down that have freed me throughout my life.
Okay, mic drop. Okay. Okay, silence and the power of speaking into that void, right? And okay, immediately naming fear and how much fear is the currency of the people who have the most to gain when we don't speak into our full authority, into our full power, right? And yes, it had to be very scary to write this book because holy crap, like the levels of, untouchables that you touch and things that are unsayable that you make clear is, I think, part of the reason why a lot of especially marginalized people have wisdom in remaining silent because it is self-preservation, right?
Yeah.
But part of our work is helping that sister who's listening here to understand, listen, the thing that you have, even though it makes you scared, it's so powerful. The world deserves to hear it so that we can actually move through. And what I want to understand in this next question is something you're already beginning to answer. What's at stake? Why is it so important for us to tell the truth? What's at stake when we tell the truth? I love that Adrienne Rich quote that you bring in because that is part of what happens, right? The quote I'm going to paraphrase here, but you and her, she speaks about when you tell your truth, you give others the courage. It's contagious. Others then begin telling the truth too. I want to hear from you in your calculus of writing this book, and also just generally in saying things that need to be said, and also in considering, am I the right person to tell this truth?
Yeah.
How do you weigh what's at stake, which is both the cost, because it's real and we don't want to pretend that there isn't a personal cost,
Mhm.
and the reason why we do it is because when we take away that fear, they don't have any, there's no power there anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I just am a firm believer that, telling the truth, it doesn't mean you have to tell it recklessly.
Mm,
Um, you can, you need to be thoughtful about putting the people and the protection around you to be able to tell the truth. But that I'm a firm believer that when you are strategic about it, telling the truth always offers more safety than staying in the lie and then silence. And, I think that I had just for reasons outside of my control, for whatever reason, I had early experiences with telling the truth. I was 5 years old when I spoke the truth about sexual abuse in my family, and not knowing, as a child, what the cost was of telling the truth. I lost my father's side of the family, which had been my entire world, my Sri Lankan side of the family. My mom's side of the family is white, so it was also the only connection I had to the culture that most matches how people read me when I walk down the street. So there was a big cost to it. And, but I understood that, there's also the benefit that you get free. And so you have to reckon with loss. You have to reckon with, losing the people who want to stay in the lie, but that freedom ultimately is worth it. And I think becoming an organizer, you learn that lesson again and again and again, because that's what grassroots organizing is about. It's about coming into a situation where there's been oppression, and maybe that oppression has existed for decades without anyone feeling it was the right or strategic time to speak on it or to take it on. But if we think about like the farm workers in California, for example, decades of oppression, and then Dolores Huerta, who I had the great honor of interviewing for this book, and Cesar Chavez starting the United Farm Workers Union and saying, we're going to speak on this and we're going to remind people of the power that they have to move through the fear. And then we're going to transform the conditions. We're going to take the heat, which they did, from the agribusiness goons and from everyone else. They took the heat. But at the end of the day, there was additional freedom that was won and it was worth it. And so that ethos has been, it's like that early lesson, but then learning it again and again and again as a community and a labor organizer, supporting other people to move over the wall of fear. That's the entire central project of organizing. So I just think that is important. I mean, in terms of who's the right messenger for it, I think that, the central principle of organizing is that it's when the people most impacted gain the power and the tools to use collective action to transform the policies and systems that impact their lives, to liberate themselves. And so it was interesting for me situating myself in this because, I'm a woman of color who has spent so many of the 30 years of my career in movement in relationship to the leadership of other women of color, but from different perches. I was an organizer looking up to my leads who are phenomenal women of color. Then I was an ED talking to my peers across kitchen tables about what kept us up at night. Then I was, a funder who had over 100 women of color led organizations in my portfolio, seeing the trends, seeing what was happening to people, how the kind of support people needed. But I would say even with that, I cannot tell you the number of times when I was writing this book that I had that negative self-talk of who do you think you are to write this book? Like, who do you think you are? What do you know? You need more expertise, maybe or the voice about ways that I felt I failed in leadership, which certainly we all fail, but that kind of internalized patriarchy and white supremacy that tells you if you if you remember a failure, that if you're not perfect, then you're not equipped, then you're not qualified to speak on something, to write on something. And so it was definitely a practice of getting through that with, good folks around me to remind me also, to be able to continue to move forward with the project and bring that voice and bring in the voices of my sisters around me, which I think is a superpower of how women of color often move, is that we acknowledge we don't know everything. There's humility around that, and bringing in the sisters who may know the pieces that we don't, and we learn in the process. And so it was writing the book was a masterclass for me as well, just learning from all these incredible leaders.
Yes. One of the things that I think is so phenomenal about this particular book, you interviewed 45 of some of the best thinkers, strategists. It's not just leadership, right? It's a 360 way in how they be, which
Yeah.
is an example to humanity of like, wait a minute, like we do have North Stars. We do have the answers. We're sitting here being like, how are we going to survive? Oh my God, the earth is leaving. Actually, if you listened to the right people, we might be on track. And this next question, what I want to unpack a little bit, because again, I think this is really salient to the person who is listening. In the
Mhm.
book, you talk about these five attacks that come, right, at women who are leaders, who are in these positions of power, and how those are used to bench the best players. Number
Yeah.
one, I'm not a basketball person at all. But the book is done so beautifully. I understood exactly what it meant. I was like, oh,
Oh,
okay,
good.
I got you. I got you. It's like you have Kobe Bryant and you have like, I don't know, somebody else who's amazing. And instead of putting them on court, you're making them sit down, right? So
Yes.
help us unpack this analogy and also walk us through these five different points. The reason why I say that this is salient is
Yeah.
folks who are listening, they may be emerging thought leaders. Some of them may be a lot further in their thought leadership. But what I want them to understand is this is most likely something you are going to personally experience yourself. And when you do, number one, be ready, right? Don't say somebody never told you because Vanessa's about to put you on school. But number two, you have a playbook. Like you don't have to do this alone. This isn't something that is, oh, well, how do I navigate this? Pick up the book. It will walk you through all of the different things. But also Vanessa's going to give you like a real quick masterclass.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So the sports analogy, thank you for bearing with it. I'm glad to get it. I know it's not for everyone. And that was like hilarious on the tour too, because some cities it's like it just isn't, it's so easy. Like Philly,
Yeah,
no problem. Oh,
yeah.
you got to scaffold a bit.
But you did such a great job. You did such a great job. I saw a little clip of you in Oakland translating it to spiritual warfare, and I was like, okay,
Yes.
okay, I
Yes.
think I came on another level.
Well, yeah, it's like when I say bench your MVPs, I'm saying, you don't go out to the playoffs without your MVPs on the court. You don't,
Great,
set intentions, spiritual intentions with the best mantras,
great.
help bridge it for everybody. But yeah, so I mean, I think the MVP metaphor is, really saying that in so many ways, women of color have been the MVPs of social change in this country.
Mhm.
And what makes anyone an MVP of anything? It's really two things. It's points that you put on the board, and it's extraordinary skills and abilities. And so first of all, when we look at the points that progressives count on our side of the scoreboard, so many of them were put there by women of color.
Mm.
We know that
Say
women
that
of color,
again. Say that
yeah,
again.
so many of them. I mean, we could look,
Mm.
we've got, you
Mm-mm.
know, hundreds of thousands of kids in this country who benefit from free and reduced breakfast and lunch in schools. That doesn't happen without the Black women of the Black who created the Black Panther breakfast program. We've got, just even looking at how bad things are now, imagine how much worse it would be if we hadn't had 4 years to have a breath in between Trump administrations. And that breath was brought to us by Black women organizing voters in tough states like Georgia. It was brought to us by Latinas and Native women in places like Arizona, API and Arab women in places like Michigan. So, I mean, this we need to understand this, and that was part of the inspiration for the book. Is a lot of these incredible efforts and victories are unsung. The sheroes behind them are unsung. But the skills and abilities are important too. And I talk about the three superpowers being number one, 360-degree vision, which is the ability to tackle those forces that I mentioned of white supremacy, patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism simultaneously, which is just so critical when we think about the moment we're in of rising authoritarianism. And authoritarianism is here in the US, it's on the rise globally. We now have more authoritarian governments than we do democratic ones globally. But understanding these three superpowers as critical to defeating that. So when we talk about 360-degree vision, the integration, for example, of a gender analysis is so critical because you don't, the path to fascism and authoritarianism is nearly always paved with the eroded rights of women and LGBTQ people. And so you have to understand that. You have to understand that, it is not just closing the front door to economic oppression or fighting for that in terms of the house of liberty or freedom. You can't close that door and then leave the side doors of patriarchy and transphobia open by not defending abortion access and not defending against transphobia, because those are the very doors that they just came in for us. The second superpower is really looking at boldness as a strategy, and boldness as opposed to moving to the mushy political middle. And we see it as the squad, as the left flank in Congress. We see it in Tish James and how she's navigating in New York. We see it in the leadership of people who are willing to fight for the fullness of what our communities need to thrive and what the planet needs to be livable instead of compromising. And that is really critical when fascism relies on timidity in order to advance. So staying bold is critical. And then generosity, really the conviction to be in the practice of solidarity. I mean, saying we're not going to leave, our immigrant communities, or we're not going to leave our trans kids or pregnant people or anyone behind in order to win. We're going to lock arms. We're going to understand that you don't leave the most marginalized and the most vulnerable, not only because when you do that, you sacrifice your soul, but because when you do that, then it hastens like their ability to come for everybody else. So understanding that piece, that solidarity jams the gears of divide and conquer that fascists rely on in order to succeed. And so those kind of superpowers, that they're in the book, they've been in the praxis of women of color organizers forever, but they are more important for everyone to adopt now. And then in terms of the question about the barriers, so there's 5 of them that I talk about. And we've witnessed the largest ascension of women of color into top leadership positions in movement in this country in the last 20 years in the history of the United States. So, you'd think that, well, we have these superpowers. Wouldn't we just be killing the game and like having a wonderful time? But we were invited into movement kind of like Jackie Robinson was invited into the majors. We were treated differently than our white and male counterparts from the start. And that different treatment wasn't just coming from, the right wing. It was coming from within movements. It was coming from within our own organizations. So the 5 top things that bench us, one is the invitation onto a glass cliff to lead an organization in crisis. Second is the assumption of incompetence. The third is the expectation to mother and mammy. The fourth is being given zero margin for error. And the fifth is that when you are attacked, you're often abandoned. So I can unpack those. I'll pause there, but I can certainly unpack those and describe them a little bit more. But I'll just pause with the list in case you wanted to ask any follow-up.
We're going to pause, and we're definitely going to encourage folks, if number one, if you're living through something like this yourself, because a lot of people are in organizations, they're leading they're entrepreneurs, you want to pick up this book so that you can see all of the different frameworks and how Vanessa unpacks them, and also the tools that you can begin using right now, right? And they're not, I think the 5 different ways in which we're attacked, you don't necessarily go through all of them all at once, hopefully. But what I find really fascinating about them is it's not just women who are in movement who are living through this, right? This applies to you could be like a true capitalist VC straitjacket woman who is experiencing at least 3 out of these 5 right now, right? You could be somebody who aspires to write purely fiction. I'm thinking about somebody like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie and the number of times that she has in the public gone through you could be Beyonce. We've seen Beyonce in the public square going through various pieces of these different kinds of attacks. So we're giving you this toolkit so that you can use it. And I also want to walk back a little bit, right? Like let's reverse gears a bit for a moment and ask you, because I imagine when you first sat down and imagined writing this book, number one, you might not necessarily you probably had lived through the praxis, but it's not necessarily something that you might have had like written out, right? And what I want to know is, what is the moment, the catalytic moment for you that told you, I have to write this book? Especially because we just spoke about how rightfully fearful you could have and were at the beginning of this journey, and how so many people have important things to say. But number one, and I really appreciated you sharing this, you questioned yourself so often throughout the writing. Am I the person? Do I know what I'm talking about? Even though you are the most qualified person to do this work, right? So the question is, what was that moment? And bring us inside that moment where you knew, no, this is not just something that I'm leaving at the kitchen table to speak about with my sisters who understand, or this isn't just something that I'm leaving in a group chat, because a lot of times in the group chats, we're commiserating over things that are difficult to say in the public square. When did you say to yourself, like, Vanessa, swallow the big pill and let's get this done?
Yeah. Well, I would say that this book was like a spirit that just kept coming to me and tapping me on the shoulder and wouldn't leave me be for years. So I would say probably starting around 2015, I wanted to read a book like this. I needed as a leader. And I couldn't find it. And so it kept tapping me on the shoulder to write it. And, I'm like, I don't have time to do this, pushing it away, pushing it away. And at that point, really the moments that were inspiring me to do it was seeing the incredible impact that women of color leaders were having in community, changing material conditions for hundreds of thousands of people. And that it was so unsung and it was so unfunded. And I wanted to scream it from the rooftops. I wanted everybody to know about their incredible work. So that was the impetus. And I thought that would be the main focus. And then I will also talk about some of the things that are difficult in leadership. So I would say like kind of love, awe, inspiration was that first spark. Then we get into 2020 and we've got, progressive movements starting to eat themselves alive because of the kind of compounding pressures of, we've got now 4 years of Trump, COVID, murder of George Floyd and the uprisings, climate disasters, all of the things that are occurring. And they're just like the kind of cannibalization that's happening within movements. And then the things that were already difficult for women of color leaders, it's like the volume got turned up on everything. And then I start to have moments where it's grief. It's grief that's motivating me to write the book, because I get on a conference call and it has like some of the top brass women of color leaders from across movements. I mean, tough, seasoned sisters who I have known for decades to go up against some of the most difficult forces in the right wing, who have delivered time and time again for community, and seeing them on calls in tears because of the level of attack they're under from all sides. It broke my heart. Hearing from people who, like one woman said, she had talked to 8 different leaders who had said they were resigning their CEO or ED positions and would never consider such a position again. And for me, understanding the incalculable loss that this represents, to lose some of our best and brightest mid-career with all the training, with all the relationships that they hold, that is not something that movements can afford. Watching it rip through the more than 100 grantees that I was supporting, watching organizations close, watching people leave movement permanently. So grief was there. And then there was the more immediate thing of what was happening, even experiencing within my own organization as a leader, which is, not only the grief, but like sitting alongside this profound irritation with realizing the influx of people that had come into movement who were in many cases here for the wrong reasons. And I say this pretty bluntly as the Karens and Kens of movement, as the jobs have gotten, the pay has gotten better, the benefits have gotten better, which are all good. And by the way, women of color were at the forefront of all of that and making the jobs more sustainable as well. That we've got folks coming in. So so you're having these experiences as a leader of serious dissonance where, in the morning I'm talking to, trans women of color in LA who have just buried 3 members of their community who have been murdered by the LAPD. And then in the afternoon, I have, someone come into my office and say, I know I've only been on the job for 2 weeks, but, I'm going to need you to change my title because my life coach says it's bad for my brand. And it's like, what is like having to explain to people that, no, you cannot expense a personal yoga retreat at a resort in Mexico to staff development. When money is going to trans leaders who are fighting for their lives. Like, these are some of the things that are like so profoundly irritating, but also like dispiriting. And we're spending a lot of time in the dysfunction, and there's not a lot of conversation about it. And a lot of that is impacting women of color leaders more because what? People, because of the mothering and mammying thing, people will ask us for things that they would never even think of asking a white man, cis white man leader for. And the expectation that, you deliver not just a fair work environment, but a utopia where no one ever feels a discomfort or a trigger. And then the punishment that's meted out against you in the public square, oftentimes, if you don't deliver on that impossibility. The expectation that you are going to, provide all kinds of emotional labor that is never expected from, white or male leaders. All of this volume turned up. So those were the things, it's just like, I want to win. I want to win. I'm very clear. And I want to win like I want my 2 daughters to have a democracy to live in and a planet to live on. And so I am just, there's no time to be polite. There's no time to not say the thing that needs to be said. Like we need to say it because we are in the fight of our lives, and we need to make movements healthy and functional in order to meet this moment for the most vulnerable communities.
Speaking of winning, because you're clearly a winner, right? And you have created a playbook for how to win in the art of putting a book out. In a moment, I do want to dive into what you've learned, how you've won in this particular chapter of your life, which is putting the book out. But even before putting the book out, getting really strategic about how am I going to get this book in the hands that deserve to have it in their hands, and also so that the book itself becomes the movement, right? And part of the movement that is happening. I want to get into that case study style in just a moment. But before that, I want to shout out something that you said, which I think is so important for people to hear, because a lot of folks have multiple books inside of them and really powerful books. And if you're that person who is listening, I don't know who needs to hear this, but let me tell you something. Don't wait for that moment of like pure inspiration with unicorns and rainbows. The thing Vanessa just dropped and told you is I was irritated. I was I was grief stricken, and it wasn't just me. I was looking at my sisters being thrown out of the play when they deserved to be the person with the ball all the time, right? And you also said something really powerful, which is Toni Morrison's quote, basically, if there's a book that you are waiting to hear or read and you haven't come across that book, God dang, like nobody else is going to write that book except for you. She talks about that and how she sat down. That's my dog in the background. So if you can hear it, it's an interspecies podcast, okay? She talks about the importance of understanding that the book that keeps tapping you on the shoulder, stop ignoring that and get to work. That's how The Bluest Eye came to us. That's how Unrig the Game has come to us. And that's how your book, Listening, is going to come to us too. Use the irritation, use the grievance, use whatever powerful thing that you're feeling. That's what you need to channel into the book. I also want to say the love that you spoke about and the communal aspect and wanting to celebrate all of these superheroes, that's such a clear and powerful through line throughout the book, right? This is very clearly a book that is written to people as a love letter, but also as a, yo, we got to get our shit together, okay? And
Yeah.
speaking of getting our shit together, tell me, please, what has your experience been publishing the book? And specifically, I want to hone in on something because I know both as a writer, and I also know through conversations with you, the landscape has shifted dramatically. The kind of support that's traditional from the mainstream publishers, right? Where they would send you on multiple city stops for a book tour, that's completely revolutionized and changed. You sell this beautiful book, you're really excited to get the book in people's hands. And then what happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I first of all have to just credit my editor. I have a wonderful editor, Jamia Wilson at Random House, who I can't say enough about. And I was very intentional about, I was very clear that I wanted to choose an editor. And when I also looked at publishing houses, it wasn't for me about the most important thing for me was to have an editor who could be a partner with me in understanding and having integrity around the content of the book and who would be an advocate. And Jamia Wilson very much was that and helped me to kick the tires of my ideas and pushed me to broaden the audience, but also understood my goals and wasn't going to push me to go beyond what the heart and soul of the book was, or water down the heart and soul of the book in order to just reach a broader market. And I'm really grateful for her for those things. And when you get into publishing has shifted a lot, and there are just some realities about how much publishing houses have the capacity to do, and then how much you as an author need to be prepared to take on. And so, I think Random House was awesome in terms of certain aspects of promotion and doing the design and the cover, and it helped me with a couple of book tour stops. But my goal with doing a tour, and I did a 10-city tour, was to have conversations with community where people could really roll up their sleeves and get in there with the content of the book, and we could start to have generative conversations, and where it would also feel like a loving community environment where people could gather and just feel the good vibe and the strength among each other as well. And so I did a 10-city tour. I had two very large events, like 200 to 300 person events in Oakland and Brooklyn. And then I did a little kind of medium-sized one in Los Angeles. But 7 of the 10 were independent bookstores that like varied in size. So from, a Busboys and Poets in DC that, where you could fit 200, to smaller bookstores that could maybe accommodate 30 people. To fund the tour, I had to, as I said, the Random House supported with two of the 10 stops, but the rest I fundraised grants to do that, and just recommend in terms of a real nuts and bolts piece to start to do that, like, not like 6 to 9 months in advance of your book launch date. And then I brought in a village around me to support me with this. And that, I mean, I think in many ways, the village is such a core lesson that the book taught me in every aspect, from, not just saying what was in my head to interviewing other people and bringing their wisdom in, so I could share that, but it could also nourish me in the process to doing the tour. And the village around me in the tour was, I had my former sister-in-law, who's an event planner. She planned the Oakland and Brooklyn events. I brought in my 22-year-old goddaughter, who's fantastic, who did all of my logistics, including, managing all the Eventbrites for all the cities, booking my travel. I had 40 organizational co-sponsors, many organizations, including foundations and grassroots organizing shops and, leadership communities that I've been a part of, where that have been a part of my movement journey over all of these years that supported with promotion and with turnout. I had, key people who anchored additional turnout and promotion in key cities. And and it was a good reminder, because so much of the time when we take things on, I think that is the nature of capitalism, is there's a lot of focus on the individual, and we forget that we don't do things alone. We didn't get here alone, and to just continue to bring in our village, and it nourishes people to be able to be a part of the process, and it helps you feel the strength of that community behind you. The tour itself, my daughters came with me on the first few stops, and I have a 6-year-old, well, now 7-year-old actually, but she was 6 at the time, who is like, she opened the Oakland and the Brooklyn stops with doing like an air guitar of Joan Jett, I Love Rock and Roll. So she got her moment
Oh.
in the sun, and it was just like, it brought me so much joy. And my eldest daughter, who's was 13 at the time, did she introduced me in the city, so that was really special. And yeah, and just starting out with things that helped to ground me. I had a lot of anxiety around the tour, which we can get into if you want, but but I was very, very happy with how it went, and I did a lot of work to overcome that.
And you did a lot of work to pull it off, because let me tell you something, 10 city book tour is not a joke, right? Especially when it's something that you are leading yourself, you're the talent, but you're also managing all of the logistics that go behind the scenes. I want to dig a little bit more into some of the things that you've shared. So
Yeah.
number one, I think this is really helpful, especially for folks who've never published a book before, to
Mhm.
understand the timeline. And
Yeah.
you started talking about that. You said at least 9 months before, you already should be in conversation with people, especially if you're thinking, I'd like to partner with them. I'd like to go to this particular city. I want to say something like a tag on to that.
Yeah.
Going to engage external PR, right? And by
Yeah.
external, what we mean is not somebody who works at your publishing house, somebody who works outside of the Random House. If you're going to engage somebody like that, yo, get shopping minimum a year before the book comes out. And you
Yes.
know that your book, one of the things that's maybe surprising to folks is how far in advance you probably had a finished book. It came out 2025. So I'm guessing you had a finished manuscript at least 2 years ago.
Yes, that's correct. And absolutely. I mean, I neglected to mention, so I'm glad you're raising it, that I had to put a whole team around me, which included not only the event planner, not only the family members who helped me with the event planning components, but an external PR firm,
Yes.
a website designer,
Yes.
social media person who helped me with
Yes.
that aspect. I did a couple sessions with a very high level speech coach to help me think through, the talk on the book tour, and to help me prep for, TV and other interviews. So, you
Mhm.
want to put a team around you. And yeah, the PR firms book up. I started searching for my PR firm in June of 2024. My book launch date was March 4th, 2025. And I will tell you that almost all of them were already booked up.
I know.
So, like, this is something that you want to start 12 months in advance. Finding a social media person, probably at least 9 months. I started all of this, in around June, and I will say that I just by sheer luck ended up with this incredible social media person, Natalia Alfonso, who I can't say enough about. I mean, who's still working with me, and was just like this incredible blessing on the tour, because she knows the book world more broadly. But
Mm.
if not for that, that was sort of a lucky miracle. I think it's wise to start even earlier on that piece. I got a website up. You really want the website up probably like at least 4 to 5 months before the launch date. So yeah, I mean, it's good to get these things in place. And then, the last 3 to 4 months, you're really in the nitty-gritty of the logistics, of the tour bookings and like the places and the turnout and all of those things.
And one of the other things, if we go even further back, that I wanted to ask you about, you speak about your editor at Random House and how much of a powerhouse and an
Yeah.
amazing human she is. Talk a little bit more about that, because I know that the process of, number one, getting an editor can be daunting to folks, and thinking through, I think here it really matters that you're a seasoned leader, right? So you're not being um, charmed by all of the bells and whistles that can come, like the veneer of things. You're listening in and you're very clear before you even have these conversations with an editor. This is the integrity of the book that I need to hold on to. And I say this again, this is for the benefit of the person on the other side. If you're selling a book right now, editors are very excited to acquire books. That's their business, right? But you want to be mindful of the editor who's going to be in it with you through and through the end. And
Yeah.
I'm an editor, and that was one of the things that I was really serious about. But the integrity, and to go even a step before that, how did you get into your conversation with your editor? Did you have
Yeah.
an agent before? How
Yeah.
did you put together your proposal? All of
Yeah.
that. How did you even get into that conversation?
Yeah, so I started from scratch. I don't know nothing about writing a book. I
Mhm.
contacted Priya Parker, who wrote a fabulous book called The Gathering Place, who I'd met and hit it off with at a meeting. And I said, "Well, how did you do your book?" So she's the one that gave me the like step by step of how does a book, soup to nuts, how does a book get published? And she said, "You got to get an agent. The agent will help you develop a proposal. The proposal can get early shopped. You can, certain publishing houses can be given an early look. And if one of them wants it and you want to accept that, you can go there. If not, you can go to auction and then people bid on the proposal. And then you can decide which bid you want to accept to go to with a publishing house." I started out talking to agents that Priya referred me to. Then I reached out to Jamia Wilson, who I had known for years. Um, just in the context of movement, because I knew she had moved, she was in publishing. She's previously at Feminist Press and now Random House. Took Toni Morrison's old seat at Random House. So
Oh,
to me,
no,
is
I mean, no
I
big
just
deal.
love
Small cake.
her. So, and she said, "Well, wait, before you sign with anyone, I want you to talk to this agent, Tanya McKinnon." And I talked to Tanya McKinnon, who's very much a New Yorker, very blunt and direct, and also represents people in the genre of like critical books around race and around gender. So she really, really deeply understands the content, and she's tough. And in the minute I met Tanya, I said, "Okay, this is the person that I want representing me,"
Mm.
because I actually want someone who's going to help me kick the tires of my ideas and challenge me and not just fluff me up and
Yes,
move it through, because I'd rather get my ass kicked here than
yes,
out in the world.
yes.
So Tanya is just excellent. She's the type of person who I'll say, "Well, what do you think about this?" And she'll say, "I hate it." Just like, I love that. I'm like, okay. Well, why hate it? But it's like it's not beating around the bush. So I loved working with her. And then she um, has a relationship with a lot of different editors. And she said, "Well, would you like to talk to Jamia about whether she wants this book?" And I said, "Well, Jamia would be my absolute dream editor, because Jamia is not only so brilliant and skilled at the craft of editing and navigating the publishing world, but she's also her heart is aligned and her politic and her values are aligned. So she is someone who's truly about liberation of our communities. And I knew she would keep that at the center of the gravity of our work together. And that was important to me. And so then Jamia had an early look at the book and said that it definitely fit within the area that she was in Random House, which is, also like the same kind of the same area that like James Baldwin published through. And I mean, it was very intimidating also. Also like, oh my gosh, what an incredible opportunity to be able to like work with her and in a publishing house where, I quote James Baldwin in the book and they can actually look in their archive
Wow.
microfiche of like what the original
Wow.
quote was that he said when he was an
Wow.
author with that imprint. So that was wild. But yeah, so just working with her, and then your editor is really your advocate in with the publisher for everything from dealing with the design team around the cover to dealing with the marketing team around the title and around the PR and the media plan, the gift boxes of the book that are going to go out in advance,
Mhm.
to influencers, like the journalists who are going to be contacted. All of these pieces, are, and any endorsements that you may want that you may not have direct relationship with, but that, your editor or the publisher may have relationships with. All of these pieces, your editor is in your corner, but the most important piece is, helping you, and Jamia is masterful at this with just kind of the big picture um, editing and organization of the book, but keeping, helping to stretch you to think about how can I reach the broadest possible audience while keeping, the heart and soul of the book intact. And
Mhm.
that was an area where she helped push me and stretch me, but never beyond, what felt integrity with the
Mhm.
purpose.
Mhm. Huge, huge. That
Yeah.
is the gold and the gold standard. I want to follow up on this because it's a really important and not fine print point. It is the point, right? A lot of people get their advance, and that happens again. The book is sold 2 years ago,
Yeah.
and you see this check, you're so excited, and let's go on the most lavish trip to Mexico, doing this yoga place or whatever it is that feels much to you. Sound advice that I have heard is thinking about a portion of your advance, your book advance, as a down payment on how you're going to promote this book. I'm saying this because I want to talk about money and I want to talk about the line item all the line items that you highlighted. You had a social media manager, you had a PR agent, you had a website designer, you had a speaker coach, right? A speaking coach who helped you with training and getting ready for being in front of the camera as well as on stage. You also worked with family, and maybe with family, the arrangement's a little bit different, but I want a person to think about this. You're
Oh, no,
going,
I paid family. I believe in paying
there we
family.
go. There we go. Family was paid. There was an event planner that was paid. There was a logistics person who was paid. That ain't a little bit, that's not like a tiny little penny, right? And so I'm saying this to you because you're listening and you have a book inside you, and we want this book unearthed. Think about all of those different folks who need to be compensated and think really strategically about how are you going to compensate them. It could be a combination of your book advance, like I said, and I know a lot of writers also throw in their own personal finance. I would love to hear from you. How did you think about this? And then also the real thing that I heard that was like ding, 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 not enough conversation around this. Grants to hold events. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
As part of your book tour.
Yeah. Um, it is, this is something that I didn't anticipate going into it about the price that it was going to cost money to do this. And so you do have to raise money. I mean, I think all told, by the time I had gotten through everything, I, probably had raised about 150K
Mm,
to cover it. And there's certainly ways to do it for less, but I think somewhere between like 30 to 150K, for like the Honda version of a bookstore. I certainly know people who have done more. And, with more lead time as well, and depending on if you're an academic publisher, you can do a lot of the book tour stops at colleges and universities and actually be paid for those stops. That wasn't my situation. Um, you can certainly not do larger events in the way I did and just do bookstores, and that makes it more affordable. But it is, to me, I'm a former labor organizer, and I believe in compensating people well when I can. And so yeah, I had to do research and talk to other authors about sources of grants. They've shifted quite a bit since I raised funds. I had one foundation that preferred to remain anonymous that did give me a grant, and then I did get a grant from the Pop Culture Collaborative, which is just incredible. And I can't say enough about those folks over there for their support of, getting voices out there. And for them, it was really because the tour was structured in a way that was around like political education and conversations and like deep engagement of the community in the content of the book.
mhm.
And, often building in days where I would, be with community, um, and supporting leaders and conversations with leaders in and around that. And then the way that that work would continue even beyond the tour, which was, the tour itself was kind of stretched over like maybe 6 weeks. But being able to do follow-ons when people have invited me to cities across the country. I think I've traveled over 60,000 miles this year. Just going to different cities and sitting with communities of people to engage with the book in the way that they want to. Those grants have also made that happen. So I wouldn't say that all those funds were not just the tour. It was really towards the purpose of the book for me is not to sit on a shelf, not to become an influencer. I mean, it's like I had 3 followers on Twitter when this all started. I mean, I've just never been someone who that was important to. It's like if I need to increase that to get the word out about this, that's great. The purpose was not, financial. The purpose was completely to put this tool in as many hands as possible so that the job of leadership for women of color in movement becomes easier. That was the purpose. In order to do that, as an organizer, I know you got to engage with stuff, you got to have the conversations, and you have to start to kind of deeply be in the praxis that comes out of the book is just a very first step. So it's all of that work that's been over the course of this entire year and still going that was funded.
Yeah. Um, I think that is one of the most important things that people, after the manuscript is finished and before you hand it over to your agent or to your editor, getting as clear as you can for yourself. What is the purpose of this book? What do I want this book to do in the world? And you're not going to be able to control all of that because once it's out in the world, it is no longer a thing that's living in your head. She's
Yeah.
not because she knows. But the integrity with which the book goes out into the world has to meet the intention that you set at the very beginning for yourself to say, I want this book in the hands of this particular such and such fill in the blank because and fill in the blank. And once that's done, I will be satisfied. It's important to know that because it's very easy once the book is out to be pulled in 500 different directions. And it's also very easy once the book is out in the world to see how other books are doing and to begin wanting things that you never wanted when the book was something sacred inside of you. And I can't tell you how important that North Star is and beginning there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was just, I was always very clear on that. And Yeah, and with the advance, sock it away if you as much as you can. I mean, obviously you have to use some of it to have the time and spaciousness to write, but sock it away so that you can use it to accomplish the purpose of your book. And
Exactly.
that's the most rewarding thing. I really believe in setting intentions. Like I do that. I set intentions before, like throughout a project and then before every step.
Mm.
But the just the intention that I wanted women of color leaders to pick up and read this and to have a feeling where their shoulders came down and they could exhale and say, "Oh my God, I'm not alone. It's not just me. Some of this stuff is systemic." And here's some of the sisters who I love and respect the most in movement who are telling me that they've faced it too. And here's how they've navigated it. And here's what I'm entitled to expect of people around me, because it's not just my job to navigate it alone. Other people need to be changing these conditions and supporting and flanking me. And I wanted allies of women of color leaders to read it and find ways of becoming aware so
Mhm.
that one day my hope is that there's no, anytime a excellent woman of color leader is in a room and there's one of these things is trying to bench her, that there's at least two people in that room who recognize
Yes.
the dynamic and who
Absolutely.
know enough to intervene in it.
Yeah.
Like if we can get to that point, which of course is a long journey, but the talking about it and breaking the silence is the first step. Like that is the intent. And I do feel like immense satisfaction about just being able to the progress towards that intent. I mean, I get letters and notes from people all every week, from like remote domestic violence shelter directors on the reservation, in their
Hmm.
state to people who are leading national organizations and are quite visible. I get notes saying, "Thank you for saying the thing.
Hmm.
This is making me feel less alone. This is making me feel like I can stay in the work." That, is the most gratifying thing of all.
And there's even in that recognition, right? There is such a through line and a deep connection to another powerful word that you said, which is community and sisterhood, and how much the book was written as a celebration of sisterhood. But then in launching the book, thinking really deeply about who needs this book, but also how can I be in partnership with people to bring this book to the hands that need it? I think that's something that's not spoken enough about because we are trained to think of the publisher as the end all be all, but really the MVPs of book launch, if there's an MVP of book launch, let me tell you something, it's all of the partners that stand with you and say, I will go on the road with you, or I will call this person, or I will be a co-host for you. I will be a
Yes,
host in this particular city and tap all of my networks. But you
yes,
have to be doing the work of priming those people so far in advance of the
yes.
fancy event, right? And also you have to be pouring into the network long before you're picking up the phone call and saying, "Hey, Priya Paka, how you doing?"
Yeah, no doubt. And I didn't mention the conversation partners. So I had conversation partners in all but one of the cities. And
Yes.
these are it was a dream, to be able to sit down with Linda Sarsour, in Brooklyn, who is like, oh, I mean, just one of my all-time sheroes, to be able to sit down with Latasha Brown in Atlanta or Siada Medmo in Portland. I mean, just Ai-jen Poo in Chicago. And I remember having all this anxiety before the book tour because it's a very inward process writing. It's like you're in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of like a fake extrovert. I think I'm very introverted. And then plus, COVID and everything, it's like we were even more in the cave. So
Yes.
this process of like emerging from writing a book to then having to like really be external in the world to get it out there, which you have to do,
Yes.
to help with the purpose of it. You have to get over that discomfort. And I remember talking to my mentor, Adisa Douglas, who is like a, former freedom writer, an incredible,
Mm.
civil rights uh,
Mm.
leader. And I said, well, I feel like I'm shy and it's going to be difficult. I feel like I have so much anxiety around this. And to be able to call on people like that to check you. And she said, shy. She was like, "Oh, I don't see that. Like I've known you for years. I don't, just to remind you of yourself, I
Right.
was like, I'm
Right.
not really sure what you're talking about. Like,
Right.
you know
Right.
how to do this." And then she said, "And you're going to be with all these conversation partners, all these people you love." girl, you're gonna have the best time. You're gonna have a ball. And just bringing the fun in
Yeah.
too, I think is important, because it's like, as my therapist told me in processing pre-tour, it's like, try not to turn things into a root canal. Like I can turn anything into a root canal. Those of us who are type A. So remember to enjoy the moment. You only do the book tour on your first tour book once, like, and I feel like I was able to do that, and I'm so happy. So it felt like a joyful and celebratory time in community with loved ones, and it was wonderful.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I'm laughing at the root canal thing. It's hilarious. And we're gonna get into that in just a moment. We're about to wrap up rapid fire. I want to acknowledge just how much beauty and also generosity, I mean, like the things that you spoke about at the very beginning, as these are the superpowers. You spoke about our boldness. You spoke about our 360 vision, and you spoke about our generosity. I've experienced that firsthand with you, both in this conversation, but let me tell folks, I have experienced this at just hello. Okay. Hi, I'm V. And like you're in. When you're in, you're really in. So I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge the generosity of, and also this is hilarious because for me, root canal now is going to mean something else completely. Okay? But not even in the way that your therapist meant it. The root canal for me is the being in the therapy chair and her saying that and the being able to laugh at it. Because if there's nothing else, this book is fucking hilarious. And it's about something that is painful, right? Like this has really caused so much pain for many, many folks. And that level of generosity that you pack into the book, that yes, we're going to do difficult things and we're going to get through this, but yo, we can have a good time. Like we can keep, we can be here and be generous to one another and loving and see